Hi, and welcome to Skeingaroo podcast episode 1. My name is Jack, and I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina. And this is my podcast. You can find me on Ravelry as Banana Bee15. I'm kind of basing this off of Lisa from Knit All of the Yarn podcast, so I'm kind of gonna, until I figure out my groove, kind of follow her setup. I'm kind of a fan of that, so let me know if something works or doesn't work, and we can figure it out. Today I am wearing a sockhead slouch beanie. It's from years and years ago, so I don't remember what yarn it is. The sockhead slouch is by Katie McClure, something of that nature. I'll go ahead and link it down below. Yeah, so I figure since, this is episode 1, we'll kind of start off with a little bit about myself. I live in North Carolina, but I've lived all over the U.S. and traveled to many, many, many yarn stores. It's kind of the thing of whenever I go somewhere, I live somewhere, obviously, check out the local yarn store. I knit, spin, crochet. I haven't done any weaving, but I want to get into that at some point, and spin. I do a little bit of quilting, but it's not really a large part of my life, so I'm mostly just more into the fiber arts. I own way more yarn than I will ever use in my entire life, and that's not necessarily a problem, but it's something that I'm kind of wanting to be more intentional about, especially in the new year. So a goal of mine is actually to kind of work through my stash. A lot of that is self-striping, so you're probably going to see a lot of self-striping socks. It tends to be my go-to, that sort of thing. After our local yarn store closed this year, well, I guess now last year, because we're now in January 2026, which is wild to think about. But after our local yarn store closed last year, for a little bit, I looked into opening my own yarn store. We'd got as far as we'd come up with a name, we'd come up with the business, like we were all set to go, and just kind of decided with the way that the economy was going that it wasn't actually a feasible option at the moment. So that is, a long-term plan I'd like to get back into. It was something I was really passionate about, and the timing just didn't quite work out in my real life, like outside. So, I'd like to get back to that. But yeah, I have an incredible group of friends that you'll probably hear about fairly often. We're all crafters. We met at our local yarn store. The owner kind of threw us all together and we're like, hey, you all meet and know each other on our weekly knit nights. Like, let's get together and do a smaller group that also will do D&D. So we play D&D every week together, and they've kind of become my core group of friends. Like, I'm very fortunate that way. Yeah, so that's kind of my knitting journey. I started off when I was a kid. My mom taught me how to knit, and so it kind of took off from there. When I was a kid, I wasn't super interested in it, and then right around the time that I was 18, 19, it became everything to me. Like, knitting was my passion, still is, and I knit generally a little bit every day at least. Yeah. Skeingaroo came from the idea that I had probably 10, 12 years ago at this point. I had this idea that I floated in the back of my head about possibly becoming a yarn dyer. Obviously, as you can see, yarn has been a huge part of my life to the point that, like, there have been times where I want to make my career and let's see where this goes. And so Skeingaroo kind of was born out of that. Not Skein Deer, because that is a knit designer who I'm not affiliated with whatsoever, obviously, as just a teeny tiny little podcaster with my very first episode, obviously. But Skeingaroo, from Skein and Kangaroo, obviously. Yeah, it just kind of came to me one day, and I was really excited about it. My partner at the time I talked with, and he ran full force with it, created kind of like the branding and the idea, and that's kind of where it all fell from. Yeah, so that's kind of who I am. I figure we'll get into what the bulk of the podcast will be. So we'll start off with finished objects. Unfortunately, I don't actually have them here to show you. Like, already top of my game, first episode, and we're falling apart. But that's just kind of where we are and what to expect. Don't expect great professionalism. Um, yeah, so my two finished objects that I could actually share with you if I had them are actually Musselburgh hats. Musselburgh, however you want to pronounce it, it's kind of a thing. But they were scrappy, just basic projects, um, like a big long tube, and I just used 5 gram minis that I had accumulated from the years of, you know, accumulating yarn. Everything from ends of like little bits of yarn after the ends of projects to intentionally saving 5 grams. Years and years and years ago, I also had the idea that I would start a blanket that was all 5 gram minis that would never be repeated. So I uh, purchased minis off of people like it was my job, and have minis coming out of my ears at this point. So I used a bunch of them. Maybe next week I can actually go ahead and get those projects for you and show you. But they're just standard Musselburghs, scrappy, about 10 to 15-ish rows per color. But my partner kind of decided that they were both his. And one of them was actually his that I made. But the other one kind of just got acquired after a trip that we went on recently, and he needed a hat, and that was in my bag, and he's like, cool, I'm using this. Put it on his head, and he has since squirreled it away. So, yeah. Um, Similar project. I'm currently working on another Musselburgh. This was actually supposed to be an Advent project that I am more than a little behind on. I think I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 days in. Obviously, today is January 1st, so we're a little behind. But this is the project. I kind of just knit from the ball. I keep the ball down here in the bottom and then just knit from the top. But this is what that looks like. You can kind of imagine the other scrappy projects looking very similar, but a little less cohesive. This is using yarn from an advent that was all put together by Dragon Horde Yarns and Yarn Cafe Creations years ago. This was one of their old Harry Potter advents. I don't support Harry Potter, but this was what I had in my stash, and I'm trying to be very intentional about using my stash. So this is where that came out of, so I'm just trying to use that all up. So I am knitting on Skeingaroo 9-inch circulars, size, I want to say 4s. Let's see. There we go, size 4s. 9-inch circulars. I tend to use those anywhere that I can. Anything from socks to hats to sleeves. Pretty much whatever I can get away with it, I'm going to use a 9-inch circular. When I start at the end and right at the very tippy top, I will go ahead and use DPNs, but DPNs and Magic Circle and 2 circular cast-ons and things like that kind of are the bane of my existence. So you will see me use 9-inch circulars almost every time. So that's my first whip. The other projects that I have on the go are, I've got a sock here. So this is a bag that I'm not sure where I got it from. Let's see if it has a tag. It does not, but sometimes bags just accumulate themselves in my life. I tend to just reuse bags, a lot of Halloween bags, because it's my favorite time of the year. But yeah. So the current project that I'm working on are a pair of socks. Let's see, I've got one sock done here. Let's see if I can pull out the second one to show you where that one's actually at. Let's see here. Somehow I managed to catch myself literally in the middle of a row, in the middle of the heel flap. We'll see how that goes. But that's here. Again, you can see 9-inch circulars for everything. This is yarn by Knit Picks Felici in the Speed Racer colorway. The pattern is, let's see, so this is the Hermione's Everyday Sock. But instead of doing any of the patterning on the actual sock itself, I just do a vanilla sock, but I love the heel out of it, so I've gone ahead and, whoops, stolen that heel, and that's my most common heel. I also a lot of the time just do a little strip of 2x2 ribbing and do that for a lot of things. Kind of depends on where my availability is when I do the heel. My job is really great in that I can knit a lot of the time while I'm at work. And so unfortunately, it still takes some brain power. So if I land up getting to the spot where I need to put in a heel, while I'm at work, I will go ahead and do that 2x2 ribbing just straight through. It's a lot easier. I don't have to pay attention. But if I'm at home or somewhere else where I have a little bit more time and like thinking process power, I will go ahead and do the Hermione's Everyday Sock. I tend to do about, I want to say, I think it's like 15 rows for the cuff, and then maybe like 40 rows for the leg, something like that. I can look up what I do. I generally just go based off of height. Like I've got a pair that I know fits me really well, and I just kind of have learned that it's about yay big, and then when I go to do the second sock, I just mimic whatever was on the first sock. These are, again, Chiagoos. They're my go-to. I'll use Chiagoos for everything. Standard 9-inch circulars, size 1s. I do my socks a little bit snug. I don't think I necessarily have a loose gauge, but I like my socks really snug on my feet. So I will go ahead and do those on size 1s with 60 stitches around. So they're a little bit smaller, a little bit more snug. Just my preference. You do you on what works for you. Let's see. I have a handful of other whips that are kind of more long-term. Everything from blankets to shawls that have kind of taken a back burner at the moment. I kind of figure as I work on those, if I pull them out, I'll actually introduce them to you. One that I kind of have been working on, like in the back of my brain, thinking on pulling out. I have a giant king-size blanket, or at least king-size width. What I was thinking, I have no idea. That's about maybe like 1.5 feet deep at this point. It's giant needles, and on it I'm just holding 5 strands of fingering weight yarn and just going to town. They're again just scraps that I've accumulated that I don't know what I'm gonna do with because I've got scraps coming out of my ears. But I just magic knot them together, magic knot ball, and then just when one color runs out, attaching the next, and I call it my scrappy yarn barf. Something to that effect, scrappy color barf, something to that effect. Yeah, so as those kind of get some work and some love, I'll pull them out and show them to you, but I figure currently they're on the back burner, so I don't know when they'll actually get pulled out, so why bother kind of pulling them forward until they get some love. Next up, because I did just finish all the Musselburghs literally this week, that I've been working on, and I'm kind of burned out on working on some Musselburghs, but I need some like background knitting for work, whether that's another pair of socks or whatever. Once I finish these, I do want something that's not going to be at a heel or at a toe, so maybe something a little bit more long-term, but just easy knitting. So I have decided to cast on another sweater. I am thinking I'm going to do the Flax Light, or Flax Sock, I think they've rebranded it as. Sorry, pardon the noise. But I'm going to do that, and I'm going to cast on with this yarn. This is Kate Celine in her Superwash Merino colorway Christmas Tree. I've got 4 skeins of this from back when I was hoarding yarn like nobody's business and acquired all of it. So I have a whole bunch of this that I would like to go ahead and use. I think it's gorgeous. I've seen some of it worked up, and I'm very excited to see this. Because it's a little busy, I wanted kind of something a little bit more simple to kind of flatter it as much as I can. And I think the flax is a great plan for that. I probably won't do the garter down the sleeve, but we'll see when I get there. Um, but yeah, so that's probably on the radar to be finished up this week as soon as I finish the Advent Musselburgh. The other project that's probably on the back burner, I don't know if I'll necessarily get to it this week. When I finish that pair of socks, I'm going to cast down another. So like I mentioned earlier, I have self-striping yarn. That is the bulk of what I own. And it is also, I say this a lot, but it's coming out of my ears. So this year I'm kind of trying to be more intentional about actually using a lot of it. So background here, with me moving all over the place, I've moved many times over the last 10 years or so. And part of that meant that I was dragging all of my yarn across the country several times. And eventually it just got to the point that I couldn't afford to do that anymore. And on my last cross-country trip move, not my most recent move, but the last cross-country move, a lot of my yarn actually got put into a storage unit and kind of stuck. And I'm very fortunate that my parents are now able to kind of look at that and send me a box of yarn every couple weeks. Here's another box. Here's another box. And I'm very fortunate like that. But currently the bulk of the yarn is still stuck in Montana. And that's gonna just be for a while, and that's okay. We'll get to it when we get to it, and it also means that I can be intentional about using the yarn as it's coming back. But a lot of the self-striping that I do have access to, that I've purchased since I came back, has been Knit Picks Felici. I try to get their colorways every new season that they come out with. I'll buy a set of their colorways, and with the idea that I'll use it, and we'll see if that actually happens, because track record shows it has not. I try to use some of it, but with the idea that I'll, do 1-2 a month and get through it before the next one comes out, and that's never actually quite going through. So this year I want to be a little bit more intentional about using that. So very long story wrapped up is this is my next cast on. It is Felici in the colorway Tadpole. So as soon as I finish the Felici Speed Racer, I will use Felici Tadpole. And I'm realizing that they're actually kind of similar with the greens. But, we'll get through it. It'll be all right. Yeah, so that's kind of what's up next. Goals for this year for me, because, January, it's that goal setting season. I want to knit 2 pairs of socks a month, like minimum. For a long time, it was 1 pair of socks a month. And for several years, I actually achieved that. This last year has been a little crazy, a little hectic, and it didn't quite. I lost my sock mojo and didn't quite actually get there. And so I want to be more intentional about that. And with my new job kind of having a lot more accessibility as far as knitting time goes, I'm hoping to be a little more on top of that and roll out more socks than before. I'd like to knit 2 sweaters this year. We'll see if that happens. Like, it would be nice, but we'll see. And like I've said before, I want to be more intentional about my yarn usage, my yarn buying. Just be very careful about that. Like, both just in this, in this economy, we don't always have a lot of extra free spend. So being more intentional, but also like, I have more yarn than I'll ever use, so let's actually work on using it. Like, even if we don't use all of it, it'd be better than just letting it all sit. That is to say, I am a big believer in when we have fiber crafts, we have 2 hobbies. We have whatever craft we have, and we have a yarn collection. And collecting yarn can be its own hobby. So no shame in collecting yarn and having a yarn. We are curating our museum, so to speak. So I'm just going to flip my page here behind you with my notes. Pardon my reach. So my goals of the podcast this year, I'd like to hopefully get once a week. That's kind of where I would like to be. Sorry for my reach here. Super professional. Yeah, that's kind of where I want to be is about once a week, kind of update you, keep that sort of thing. That's kind of what I got for goals. Following Lisa's from Knit All the Yarn podcast. Her style is at the end, she kind of goes through what she's reading and watching and what she calls life stuff. Reading and watching, I am finishing up book 17, Lady of Fire from the Wandering Inn series by PirateAba. You'll probably hear a lot about the Wandering Inn series. It's kind of my favorite book series, bar none. And it takes over my life, and it's very, very long and very, very wonderful. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've been reading and currently reading. I just finished a book called Christmas Core by Jonathan Brooks. It's a dungeon style book in the lit RPG fantasy kind of genre. Dungeon core books are like, well, you can go look up dungeon core if you want to know what that is. But it's about a guy who kind of in the afterlife finds out that like he has to build a dungeon to prevent, like, he's the big bad of the dungeon, trying to prevent all the adventurers coming in to ransack his dungeon. And it's all Christmas themed because he was obsessed with Christmas. And it's very cute. It was just a little novella read for Christmas. It was a nice little book. I read lots of lit RPG. That's kind of my standard go-to. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to always, leave a comment what you're reading, things like that. I love to hear about it. I like sci-fi, I like fantasy. Those tend to be my go-tos. Things that I'm watching, I just watched all of the Mighty Nine. You can kind of see a little pattern forming of sci-fi, fantasy, D&D, lit RPG, things of that nature. Crash course through that, had a wonderful time. That came on the recommendation of my knitting circle, who also tends to follow in these same veins. Mighty Nine's on Amazon Prime. Yep, Amazon Prime. So if you want to check that out, feel free. The first season's up. It's great. It is actually the animation, like they animated the second campaign of Critical Role, which is a D&D podcast. So it's their campaign animated, which is great. That kind of leads right into things that I'm wanting to get into next. I'm wanting to get back into Critical Role, listen to some more of their podcasts. I had a great time with the ones that I did listen to, and they just started a new campaign. So that's kind of what I want to get into, listen to their new campaign for. That's probably going to be on my radar. Yeah, let's see, life stuff. Right before Christmas, me and my partner Steve went on a trip out to the San Juan Islands out in Washington with some friends. We went dancing in a cabin and had a great time, just kind of hanging out, dancing. I like to partner dance. So we had a great time there. We came back for Christmas Day, at which point I got together with my knitting circle friends and just had a good time, had Christmas dinner together. It was just a lovely, lovely, lovely time. Like, it's nice having people, and community is wonderful. Yeah, I worked the next week. See, last night was New Year's Eve. Today's New Year's Day. For New Year's Eve, I got together with some more friends of mine, including some of our knitting circle as well. They came and it was lovely. We just had like a bonfire and stayed up till midnight, and all of us by like 10:30, half of us were just like, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. But we all made it. All the kids were around. They had a great time. Not my kids. I don't have kids. But kids of the group, but they had a blast. We just hung out. It was wonderful. All brought snacks. It was lovely. The next week, let's see. I don't have a whole lot planned. It's actually kind of weirdly a chill week. I work a couple days. Um, I don't have many doctor's appointments. Just kind of hanging out, chilling out. Um, my partner's been hanging out with some friends. It's one of their birthdays, and they do like a big week-long get together. So he's been there. So he's kind of been hanging out there. So it's kind of been hanging out on myself and having some chill, relaxed time, which has been nice. Some decompress. Um, yeah, so kind of just expect some work time, some working on some knitting. I want to, like I said, finish that advent hat. This one, finish the socks. Just yeah, have it. That'll be my week. Um, I'm not entirely certain how to wrap this up, but I guess I will see you next week. Thanks. Have a good week, guys.